Yeah, so we'll dive into this, the three apostolates that Pier, Giorgio, Frassati, and like a little, looks like a bonus fourth one. And I can kind of start it off. So he had this speech to basically the Catholic youth I'm going to butcher this one, but Pollone, Italy, something like that. And the first example, which, I guess we can kind of maybe each offer a little reflection on each of these, but the first one's a good example. And the quote that he had kind of directing towards this principle for him was, "We Catholics must strive to have our whole life guided by Christian moral law." And yeah, I think he embodied that in every way. And I think one of the biggest examples, we can go to all of the, he obviously led by example. He was in every group imaginable that he could be in order to continue to help, whether it's St. Vincent de Paul Society or political groups or the lay Dominicans. But I think even in his sort of recreational activities, right, when he's climbing mountains and stuff, and he had a quote that said, like, if my studies allowed me to, I'd basically be up here all the time. And it was this point for him where it was like, that was a point that he probably felt like he could truly see God. He could see it in all of his beauty of what he created. And like, so here's somebody who dedicates all of his time to helping the poor, to protesting, to fighting for Catholic social teaching and true human rights. And then his recreational time goes to trying to go find God and going on the mountains and one of these trips where they would have mass and he would, do the rosary while they're doing all this climbing. And I'm sure his friends are like, dude, I don't want to do the rosary right now. I'm about to die. So if you could just chill out there, Pierre, and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, you talk about good example, right? Like even in these times where I'm doing, and he has a quote later on about people using their free time in vices and not sort of building themselves up in those areas. And I think that's such a key thing where, I'm thinking about, okay, what do I do in my free time? And how, you think about going outside, and you're like, I don't know, it's kind of hot or maybe it's kind of cold. But you're someone who continually actively sought out God, whether it's in nature or in the things that he did or in the poor. And I think that's how you really can lead by good example. And how he was just so joyful. I think we'll talk about that in charity as well. But a lot of his friends just talked about how he's always just smiling and just wanted to be with them, and stood by them. And by the same time was leading them in the rosary, was leading them in mass. And that's a friend right there. And that's a Christian as well.
Keone.
So what stood out to me when you read that small quote, must strive to have our whole life guided by Christian moral law. I see a man whose virtue was rooted in knowledge. So in order to even live your life guided by Christian moral law, you have to be aware of what Christian moral law is. What is Catholic social teaching, right? Which is like, he wanted to defend it, uphold it in the world and in the political sphere and society at large because he believed it to be true and he knew of it. And I think, like you said, there's a lot, Meeks, that do go under the rug right now that we just we don't even recognize as maybe what has been a downward spiral or a domino effect of chaos that has brought us to where we're in 2022. But I just see a man who is, you think the Dominicans, right? It's knowledge based and it's in study and in spreading the word and in preaching, right? So I just think of, that's what he did. Like, no wonder he's a third order Dominican. It's because he's a smart dude who wants to go live it out. And I think for us, I've talked about it, I think me personally, and just in my bits in the episodes of like, get your study up, like, learn the faith. And then when you learn it, you're transformed by it. And when you're transformed by it, then you have something to give in the world. But you can't give that which you don't have, right? How can you go and be an example of the Christian moral law when you don't even know what it is? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's something that really stood out to me, is like he embodied it because he knew it, and he knew it to be true.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you're referencing obviously the Dominican virtues when we think that, and we've talked about this before, I've mentioned it before, being a third order Dominican, like Blessed Pier, that the primary virtue is knowledge, right? Because it leads to love, right? So you can't love that which you don't know. And I think that's what Blessed Pier actually obviously demonstrated and exhibited. And I think just when you talk about good example, and I think this is something that we can all grow and learn from, we're obviously all pilgrim people. We're all broken, wounded individuals striving for sainthood. But what kind of example are we to others? And I think great call out, Keone, when you say, is a priest going to be handing out your card with your name on it only 8 years after you die to pray for your intercession? And I think that's the part where we have some work to do, because we got a lot of lukewarm, lazy, low information Catholics that are more worried about being accepted and liked worldly rather than living out Christ and embodying all of those virtues. He's the man of the eight Beatitudes, right? As he's known, and bringing that everywhere he went. And he doesn't compromise. Like, you know what I mean? He doesn't. That's the thing that's most impressive. I think this is what's so attractive to him, especially to the young adults, is like he had swag. He was a good looking dude. You know what I mean? He wasn't like a pushover or somebody you walked over. The dude was battling guards, you know, in the midst of a fight with the government. At the same time, he's feeding the poor. The poor. He's not sitting there all mashed up and worried about whether or not he's going to catch a cold, right? He's sitting there. He's just going and serving the poor.
You know, it's funny that you say that, because the whole time we've been talking, and literally last night, reading the Bible in the Year, I guess listening to the Bible in the Year. Still trying to catch up, by the way, but that's another story. It was introducing David. Mm. And to me, it's like you see this young man, Giorgio Frassati, who is so convinced of the truth that he's going out and he's going to fight whoever it is. And he's going to spread it to whoever it is, because he's so convinced of the truth. And I see that in a young David, right? Mm-hmm. Going up to Goliath, like, is this man not defiling the Lord our God, the God of Israel? Like, I don't care who he is, and I don't care how small I am. I'm going to go fight. And so, like, I just see that in that young David. And obviously, Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati is like the modern day, you know, exemplar of that. Just being like a young man who's convinced by truth, and it doesn't matter who's standing in the way. He's going to spread the truth, and he's going to stand up for what he knows. And I think that is such a gift. And that all of us, I mean, you're using your gifts, you're using if it's your physical looks, if it's your gift of persuasion, which we'll get into, if whatever it is, to bring people to Christ and to defend the truth. I think that was just a parallel that kept resonating with me, kept coming to my head. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, just the one thing to add on that, as far as being a good example of just Christian morality. I think there are so many people. I mean, we're not free from it at all. But I think when people see you, when they see your Instagram page, when they see your Facebook page, when they see your Twitter account, when they see you in the store, when they see you when you're not looking and you don't see them, what do they see? I mean, that's just real. Like, do you look just like everybody you dress? Are you immodest? Are you sitting there? Every other word is an F-bomb, but you're so supposedly Catholic. You know what I mean? And I think that's the part that I struggle with when I look at somebody like Blessed Pier. I mean, you don't get to sainthood on this side of heaven by looking like everybody else. And I mean, a challenge for all of us is like, what kind of example are we setting? Because if you got a popularity rate out there with the world, then you're just doing it wrong. We've said this so many times. I've said it so many times, but I think when you talk about being a good example, and we talked about the word strive, and we said this before, he's talking about striving to have our whole life guided by Catholic Christian moral law. That's a rigorous struggle with opposition. So yes, it's difficult to be Catholic in today's world. Whatever, wake up. You know what I mean? Like that's picking up the cross, denying yourself. So anyway, moving on.
I had one last point I wanted for the good example, just real quick, because I'm thinking about he's coming from a wealthy family, and his sister's saying the difference between them is I like success and he likes the poor. And to sit there and have that wealth, especially in a point where really, you know, in the early 1900s, only the wealthy survive. And he had even said he had disagreed with, you know, the few owning most of the lands, which included his dad was one of the few owning a lot of the lands. And, you know, when everything is pointing in the direction of you're set up for success and you're supposed to be wealthy and continue this, all he could think about was the poor, you know, and sacrifice and looking to others. So when everyone is promoting success, you know, he's probably asking, what does that have to do with virtue? What does that have to do with Christ's teaching? And I think that's probably one of the greatest examples, and something I'm continually trying to battle as I try to get through the $4.60 gas and the crazy high prices of housing and rent, is where is that balance? And at the end of the day, I think God's gonna. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think he's gonna ask us how much we made. I think he's probably gonna ask, what have you done for my people? What did you do for me? How did you spread the gospel and the truth? And so I think that's one of the biggest ways that probably goes overlooked a little bit of how to how did he lead by example? Well, he gave away all the things that we all wish we had, right? This wealthy family in the back, and he completely gave everything he had, even to not have a ride on the bus back to his home.